JB, I knew that if I could get him into the studio, I knew how much love he would be showered with.
Yeah.
And so I got him in the studio, and he told his story. And his story was that he was in the Navy for 4 years. He served on Navy submarines in the 1970s. He served his nation in a way that we, beg people to do on the regular. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that backstory and understood some of the issues that he went through. And frankly, I think many of them were horribly unfair to people that were just trying to live their lives back in the day. I got him to tell that story, and the level of people that came out of the woodwork, and I'm not talking about just listeners, I'm talking about mayors and Congress people calling up and saying, we love you, we appreciate you, thank you for your service. And he didn't kill himself.
Welcome to a podcast about music and entertainment. Before it all goes down the disposal, this is Circling the Drain.
Hey, welcome back to Circling the Drain. You know Jay Harper.
Yeah.
Hey there, Johnny B.
That's right. And now you got Jim McCarthy over there.
Hello.
And of course, me, Johnny Bozeman. Who cares? Johnny B is here. And we've got a special guest here
A
today.
superstar.
A superstar from Super Talk
We do.
99.7 WTN.
I can't wait to meet him.
Talk show host.
Yeah, look in the mirror.
Matt Murphy.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, but thank you for coming. And we can't pay you anything, but by gosh, we got you.
You got me a cardboard box.
I got you a cardboard box.
Thank you. I need
That's
this.
right. Just as long as there's no drug sniffing dogs around, we'll be fine.
Yeah, you may want to wait till you get home to try some of that.
Well, I regularly expect that I'll be fired soon, so this cardboard box will come in handy for packing up my things.
You don't have many things, apparently.
Not a lot of things.
Well, he works in radio.
Right.
But speaking of, we have worked together for a brief moment.
We did.
It was a couple of years.
We did.
At Super Talk 99.7 WTN, where, Jay Harper's still...
Yeah, I still hang around.
He's around.
occasionally.
We don't
He's
see
still
him very
there.
often. He does the traffic reports
with popcorn going on in the
with
background.
the old school teletype going on in the background.
Fill in on news occasionally.
Oh, yeah. We love having Jay. We love Jay.
Yes.
Well, we love you.
Well, thank you.
And we've been wanting to, because even though we worked together for so long, I never really got to get the Matt Murphy story. I've heard some of it. And that's why we wanted to have you in, because we want to learn more about Matt Murphy.
I didn't think this was that type of show.
Oh, it is. This is your life, Matt Murphy. No, because you came to us you actually were born in Georgia.
I was.
In Thompson, Georgia?
Thompson, Thomson, no P in Thompson.
No P.
There you go, Thompson.
Yeah, but everybody tries to put a P in Thompson, and there's also a Thomaston, there's a Thomasville, there's a Thompsonville.
Boy, there's not a lot of thinking.
And not a lot of thinking going on in Georgia.
They really didn't have creative people behind that.
We're rubes over there across the state line. So so Thompson, Georgia, which is just outside of Augusta. It's a suburb of Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah. So you how long did you live there? And
I was born in McDuffie County Hospital, September 1st, 1973. The world has known no peace nor quiet ever since. And I grew up there and lived there until I went to college at West Georgia College in Carrollton.
So what got you into radio, my friend?
My dad. My mother had malignant brain cancer in 1978 when I was 5 years old. And my father left the family. It was me, my older brother, my older sister. And my dad decided that the quote that I always heard growing up was, "I can't handle this." So he left. And my mother went through brain surgery. She was given a 20% chance to live 2 to 5 years. She lived 25 years. She died at the age of 53. So she lived a lot longer than people thought. And it was an absolute miracle that we had her for the length of time that we had her.
Yeah.
But all of that to say, my father was a radio guy. And he was kind of a wanderer, as folks in the 1970s and 80s were wont to be.
Right, we were gypsies in those days.
And
especially radio.
Yeah.
Well, and my dad would jump from town to town, and God love him. I mean, he's passed away now too. But my dad would jump from town to town until the point that he would reach a level of irresponsibility in the building, and people figured him out, and then he would get out of there. Right. So he would BS people for a while, get about a year or two out of a radio station, and then move on to the next town. So he was in Macon, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, Valdosta, Georgia, Greenville, South Carolina, Augusta a couple of times, Thompson, of course. Just all of Milledgeville. Wow. He was just jumping all over the place. And the sad part about it was he was a great radio guy. He was fabulous on the air. So long story short, I didn't know my dad very well until I was 12 years old. And my dad came back into my life, unbeknownst to us, because of court order, because he wasn't paying child support. And eventually he had to go to court. And the judge said, you're going to need to start paying. He owed like $50,000 for the 3 kids in child support. And he said, you're going to have to start paying on this. He wanted to put him in jail. And my mother actually spoke up for him and said, no, he's no good to us in there. But a part of that, and once again, we didn't know any of this, was that he had to take us for the summer, for 2 weeks for the summer. And, we got to experience that. I didn't know this guy. He left when I was 5. But we he lived in Macon at the time and worked at, I think it was WDEN in Macon, Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
The Big Den.
Yeah, I used to call that station.
Did you really?
MCA record days.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So my dad he was a music director over there, and he was the afternoon drive guy. And they called him Dr. Lee. It was Dr. Lee curing all your country music blues.
I like it.
Oh, it was his hook, right?
Yeah.
And so it was the whole doctor shtick.
Yes.
And so I went in. I was almost 12 years old. It was the summer of it was right before I turned 12, and I went to work with him, and I watched what he did, and I was fascinated. And he told me, he said, when the light, he had one of those light bulb, switches that when the mic comes on, the light bulb goes on. And he said, when the light goes on, you've got to be quiet. You've got to pay attention. And so I had this perception that when my dad started talking, everybody had to be quiet and pay attention to him. And I'm like, I want that. That's what I want. I want that in my life. And so I became fascinated with it. And I went home, and I didn't see my dad a lot after that summer. We kind of went back to normal. But when I was 14 years old, I applied to the local radio station in Thompson, Georgia, WTHO, WTWA. And it was an AM/FM combo. You guys will get a kick out of this. I thought it was big time, right? 3,000 watt FM, country music station. Yeah. WTHO, your better country FM, which we're not the best, but we're better. And WTWA is a 1,000 watt full service AM radio station. It was called the Heart of Thompson. Your favorite easy listening hits from the 40s to the 80s.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, man.
Yeah. So they were full service. They had, but here's the fascinating thing, guys, and I might be getting ahead of this a little bit, but they had back in the day, they had a news director. They had a continuity director. This is a 1,000 watt. 3,000 watt combo.
Sure.
Local, a town that these radio stations served a county of about 25 to 30,000 people. And they had all of these positions. But anyway, I applied. I was too young. Obviously, I was 14. I didn't realize that. When I turned 15, I was working at Winn-Dixie. And Mike Wall, the general manager and eventual owner of the radio station, called me. And I did not realize that he had worked with my dad when he called me up. And he told me later on in life, he said, I didn't really want to hire you because I figured if you turned out anything like your dad, you would just be a big old piece of junk.
No wonder we got along. I went through that with my dad. Every time I meet somebody in Nashville that worked with my dad in radio, it's always,
wow. You're not like him, are you?
I have to go into that. So what got you? So you did end up going to Montgomery, Alabama. I know that is that where you started talk radio?
Montgomery was where I started talk. So I worked in high school at WTWA, WTHO, and I loved radio. I loved performing, and that's what I looked at it as, performance. And so I decided that I wanted to be an actor. And that's when I went to college. I was a theater major, and I also worked at the college radio station. And at the college radio station, I learned the freedom of doing whatever the hell you wanted to do, whenever you wanted to do it, and ask forgiveness later.
Yes,
which was a very, very nice lesson. But I also learned the very important lesson that there are lines that you cannot cross. One of them, I regularly would play. We were still playing records. We were still like a college jukebox before they turned us to NPR. And we would, so we're playing, we've got these stacks of records, and I would play live cuts off albums so I could go to the McDonald's and get breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, that's radio.
That is radio.
And I was playing.
That's why Red Sovine became so big, because those songs were so long.
Oh no! So no, I was live version of Whippin' Post is 22 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And so I would put on live version of Whippin' Post, get in my car, and go to McDonald's. And so I got into a fender bender. In the parking lot of McDonald's, and the cops are there, and I got my radio on, listening to that record, and I'm like, this is gonna be bad. I'm looking at the cop going, can I go back to the radio? He's like, no, I've got paperwork. What are you talking about? You can't go back to the radio station. So that was a little bit of a line that I crossed.
You hippie.
I couldn't go back from that, right? So, I loved when they switched the format. It's kind of funny. The director of mass communications, Dr. Chester Gibson, which was a complete, I don't know, a hard ass is what he was. But we had a love-hate relationship because I think he saw potential in me, but he was also just really, really hard on me. And when they flipped the radio station to public radio, it wasn't NPR. I think it was Public Radio International is what they called it. Then, all of us that just used it as a jukebox were kind of out of a gig. For lack of a better term. And he brought me in and he said, have you ever thought about doing a talk show? And I said, well, no. And he said, I think you would be good. And I was liberal I was a sophomore in college, and I was in the theater program. I was as liberal as they come at that point.
Yeah.
And he said, I think you'd do a good job, and we want some local programming. So why don't you think about it? And so I did it. I did a 1-hour daily radio show on a college radio station. I still have tapes. No, you can't hear them because they're horrible. It's just really bad. But I got a bug out of that. I got just a buzz, and that's like a 50 watt or whatever it is. It's still one of those college things where it gets to the student center, and that's about it.
Yeah, you could put speakers on top of the building and reach more people.
That's exactly right. But I thought it was big time, right? Everybody's listening to me. And so, I traveled a little bit. I moved to Connecticut for about 9 months. If you have 9 months to live, move to Connecticut, because by the time the 9 months is up, you'll want to die.
We're in Connecticut.
We lived in Middletown.
Okay. I grew up in Danbury.
Oh, well, see,
yeah,
Jim knows.
Yeah, Jim's all over
25 years. I get it.
Connecticut, it's a beautiful state. The people are different. That's what
it's basically just like, it looks like Tennessee, just with a lot more taxes and jackholes.
That's a great way of putting it. But I was in Middletown for about 9 months and could not get a gig in radio up there to save my life, because in the South, right, I don't have a Southern accent. In the South, I sound like everybody else. But let me promise you, in Connecticut, they're like, "Who's this guy?
Where's this guy?
Who's this guy over here? Right. This guy in the radio. He's got a rubber band in his mouth.
Who's this hillbilly?"
So I moved back home to Georgia. I was looking for something to do. I worked part-time in Georgia, and I got a call from a buddy of mine that I worked with. I got my first full-time gig in country music radio in Augusta, doing 7. So my arc there was just. Mark was, I got the job doing 7 to midnight, and they liked me. And so they promoted me to middays, and they liked me there, and they promoted me to afternoons, and they didn't like me so much there, so they moved me back to middays. and apparently I wasn't good enough for middays anymore either, so they moved me back to 7 to midnight, and then they changed the format of the radio station to urban. So that ended that. And that was like all in the span of 18 months.
Oh my God.
But the one note that I remember getting from my program director all the time, a guy by the name of Bob Raleigh, was, "Would you please shut up?" Nobody. And he was like, nobody cares what you think about anything. They want to hear Shania Twain. He's like, no, he came into the studio one day, and he goes, "These are the words I want to hear coming out of your mouth. Here's Garth Brooks." That's it.
So they gave you cards. That's what I got. With cards. Read these cards, damn it.
Liner cards.
Right. So we did that for a minute, and I realized, well, maybe this music radio thing isn't for me. And it was around that time I got a call from a buddy of mine, and he, the format flipped, and I went back working at Waffle House, trying to figure out what to do. And a buddy of mine called in Montgomery and said, "Hey, we're starting up this talk radio station to compete with the Heritage Talk station, and if you're interested, you can produce the morning show." And so I went over there to do traffic in the afternoons. I did some news in the afternoons, and I was producing the morning show. And about 5 months into that, they fired me too because they felt like it wasn't working. But Don Markwell in Montgomery, Alabama, had heard me. He was the guy that ran the Heritage Talk station, WACV, and he called me up. And I'll never forget it. The first meeting that we had, Markwell was a very imposing guy with this huge, deep voice. And, I'm a young, like 25. I'm 25 years old. And the Bob Gambakurta was the guy that had started the morning show. And he had been a television guy who thought he could do radio. And talk radio is littered with TV people that think that they can do talk radio. And then they find out it's a little bit harder than they think.
Different.
And Gambakurta called his show Gambakurta Against the Morning. He thought it was, Gambakurta Against the Morning. And so,
Against the morning.
Gambakurta Against the Morning. He thought it was combative and it was tough.
Yeah.
And so I sit down with Markwell. I'm interviewing for a job. And he said, "So you produced Gambakurta Against the Morning, huh?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And there's this long pause and he said, "The morning won." I was like, "Yes, sir, it did." But he took a shot. And here's the wonderful thing. He created an afternoon news position for me. He created a local afternoon show, a morning news position for me. He created a local afternoon show for me because, look, I think that there are plenty of other people that are far more talented than me in the business, but he saw a certain amount of talent in me, and he said, "You're wasting your talent doing what you're doing over there. You need to come over here, and we need." And he was one of the old school guys that would literally look for talent and try to bring it in and cultivate it in a way that radio does not do anymore.
Does not, and hasn't for some time.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait, that's a concept?
Believe it or not. So I went to work in Montgomery at WACV. I worked briefly for the competitors. Interestingly enough, at Cumulus, who are the guys that fired me. Yeah. And at WACV, I would get up in the morning. I did an hour of like news, which was really just rip and read. I had no interest in making it a good product. It was between 6 and 7 a.m. So I would rip and read for an hour of it was a news hour. Just here's what's happening in the news. Here's what's happening in sports. Here's what's happening in weather. Here's what's happening in traffic. And then at 7 o'clock, I would produce the sports show that came on from 7 to 9 and do news for them. From 9 to 11, I produced Don Markwell's show. I would get a break from noon until 4, and then I'd come back and do my own show from 4 until 6 o'clock. And we did that for a few years before Birmingham called.
And you went to Birmingham, and you actually worked at 99.5, which I actually worked at before. It was a rock station, K99, and then it became a country station.
And people still talked about K99 when I was there, 20 years later, or whatever it was.
Birmingham, I don't know if you've got the same feeling. Birmingham was a great radio town. Right at the time I was down there, radio was like you were above TV to them.
Well, they had people like Johnny B. They had people like, and I got to meet some of these folks before. I mean, now sadly a lot of them are gone. Yeah. But people like Doug Layton, who was the voice of Alabama football. He was a color guy for Alabama football, and Doug did morning radio. John Ed Willoughby, Tommy Charles were two guys who were just absolute. I mean, it was back then when these guys were absolute, just monumental icons.
Well, they were the ones, I think it was TC and John Ed, or maybe one of them, that began the Beatle burning, the burning the Beatle records over John Lennon's, Jesus Christ remark.
It was, I think it was Doug Layton, and it was two of those three, because Tommy Charles and John Ed did stuff together. Doug did stuff by himself, and then eventually John Ed and Doug. I think it was John Ed and Doug, one way or the other. I asked him about that before Doug passed away, and Doug said, I mean, it was a radio stunt.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it was 100% a radio stunt.
But it became huge.
It exploded. He said we had no idea that it would explode in the way that it did.
Oh, yeah.
He said, but when it did, man, we were like, let's go. Let's go. We hate the Beatles.
And they had all these Southern girls, burning their albums. If they're going to talk about Jesus like that, John Lennon needs to go to church. But when did it become a talk station? Because I did know when that happened.
So it was actually when I first got to Birmingham, I worked for a number of years at Crawford Broadcasting, who's primarily a religious broadcaster, but he wanted to branch out into secular radio, and he did it too. He created a radio station, and they put me on in middays, and then eventually I got to afternoons, and eventually I got fired there too. So I mean, because you get fired. Well, I mean, I got let go because they changed formats again.
Sure.
Well, I hooked up with WAPI 1170 AM.
Oh yeah.
And 99.5 was, let's see, they went from light rock to country, then back to soft rock, and then back to country.
Wow.
In the span of like 4 years.
Wow.
And they were Nash Icon. It was Birmingham's version of Nash Icon.
Yeah.
And it was Cumulus Broadcasting that was doing it. And it was not working. And it wasn't working just for, I think these are issues systemic with radio right now, that music radio is having its own, set of issues. And it's a 100,000 watt radio station. And I knew that to be successful, I was the program director of 1170. And I was doing the morning show. We had an afternoon host and we had a news person. That was it. And I knew that in order to generate any level of success, we had to have an FM. It was just the nature of what we were doing. This was back, I guess, in 2012, 2013. And so we got a new general manager in the building, and the old general manager made a lot of promises that were a lot of lies to me, and that's fine. But I mean, they were. I mean, he just,
does that
I was
happen?
like, hey, would you?
I didn't think that happened in radio.
Right. So no, you would go to this guy and I would say, listen, I really need, can you just pitch this FM? Here's my concept. We really need an FM signal. We can make a lot of money. Oh, I'd do it, but the corporate guys, they say no. And I made the pitch again. And, you find out later on that he never even talked to him. Well, the new guy comes in, is a great man by the name of David Walls. And we sit down with him. And my good buddy, Ryan Haney, who's the program director of the sports station and the operations manager, said, don't hit him with the FM thing yet. Just let him get his feet underneath him before you go off on, because he knew how badly I wanted that 99.5 signal to be taught.
Yeah.
And he said, don't hit him with it yet. And so we sit down and he's like, all right, what do you need, Matt, to make, WAPI successful? And I said, well, we had made some changes. I said, well, we need to move me back here and we need to do this and we need to invest here. And, I gave him kind of the pitch and he said, and we do these things, API makes me money. I was like, oh no. And he was like, what? And I said, no, you're not going to make any money on this. I said, this will probably get us a little bit better ratings, but you're not going to make any money on it. And he goes, what do you mean? And I was like, no. The only way you're going to make money on this is if you give me that FM. And Ryan Haney's eyes get really big. and he was like, what? And I said, we need an FM signal. And he said, he said, why aren't you pitching me that? And I pointed to Haney. I was like, because he told me not to. So he said, tell me what your idea is. And I pitched my idea and I told him, and this was it was a miracle. It was in 2015 by then. Oh. I said, if you can convince the powers that be to invest $300,000 a year into that signal above what we're already spending on current talent, it will make you money. And he convinced them. And so we launched Talk 99.5. And it's ironic that one of the radio stations that I used in my presentation to corporate to prove to them, to demonstrate to them that the concept works, was Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Wow.
Interesting.
And I was like, this is working in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes.
Exactly what I want to do in Birmingham, Alabama is already succeeding. And you tell me that it's not making money. And they bought it, and we launched it in the spring of 2016. And we could not have launched it at a better time, obviously, because of, I'm sorry. Am I right? 2016, 2015. My gosh, I'm getting old. My dates are getting mixed up.
Resemble that remark.
No doubt. No, I guess they're 9 years old. So it was in 2016.
No doubt.
There's no question. So, and the funny thing is that we wanted to really hyper focus on local issues, and Donald Trump came along and just blew all that up.
Yeah, he did. Well, and the cool thing about you that I've always loved, and this story really grabbed me. It was a story out of Birmingham while you were at 99. Was Liberty Bell.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about Liberty Bell. That was a very touching story.
Well, if we, people ask, and you guys get asked this all the time. If you've been in radio for as long as, collectively all of us have, you have these moments and these experiences, and people want to know, the best people that you've ever interviewed and the best moments that you've had in radio. And I've always felt like the best moments come, A, organically, and B, for me at least, they're the moments that truly touch people and that impact and affect lives. And so this guy, Liberty Bell, was a regular caller, and we all, if you've been around talk radio, you listen to talk radio long enough, you understand that we have regulars, and we have, they come on, they call every day, they want to talk every day. And I had a number of regulars that would call the show, and Liberty Bell was one of those regulars. Liberty Bell was a liberal. Liberty Bell was a drag show queen, I guess. His real name was Sean. Or Ronald Sean Simoneau.
Yeah.
And he was a longtime gay activist in the 1970s and 1980s in Birmingham. And in the 90s and 2000s, he had translated that into just harassing talk radio hosts, and, calling us up. And he was a great caller and a great personality, very flamboyant personality. But he would come to our events in full drag. I mean, it was hilarious. And Ron was not an attractive man.
Why is that?
Much less an attractive woman.
Well, it just seems to always go that way, doesn't it?
I don't know.
Why is there always some guy that's, sitting at home that's, a little rotund?
Right.
Just he's not a good looking man to begin with.
You know what'll make this look better? If I put a little makeup on.
Yeah, put some mascara on.
Some spandex.
Get a boost. Yay.
Something with sparkles.
Yes.
So he was a regular caller, and I just, I appreciated the dynamic and his tenaciousness. And one day he calls me up and he tells me that he said, I just want to tell you goodbye. And he just didn't sound like himself. Yeah. And he said, I want to tell you goodbye. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Are you, I'm thinking, are you leaving? Are you moving out of town? What's happening? And he said, I'm 50. I said 8, I think. He's 58 years old. And he said, the gay people don't want me anymore. They don't have any respect for what I did for them in the 70s. They don't have any respect for what I did for them in the 1980s. They just think that I'm an old, I won't use the word that he used, but that I'm just an old drag hag.
An old queen.
Yeah. And they don't like me. He said, the straight folks are never going to accept me, so I'm going to kill myself. And I was like, what? And he said, I've decided that I'm out of here. I'm going to get out of here. And I said, and I get emotional just telling the story, but
yeah.
I said, well, do me a favor. I said, do me a favor. I said, do me a personal favor before you kill yourself. And he said, what's that? And I said, would you mind coming to the studio before you do it and just telling everybody your story? Because I don't think everybody knows it. And I did.
Yeah.
And he agreed to do that. And I knew, JB, I knew that if I could get him into the studio, I knew how much love he would be showered with.
Yeah.
And so I got him in the studio and he told his story. And his story was that he was in the Navy for 4 years. He served on Navy submarines in the 1970s. He served his nation in a way that we, beg people to do on the regular. And I wanted to make sure that people understood that backstory and understood some of the issues that he went through. And frankly, I think many of them were horribly unfair to people that were just trying to live their lives back in the day. And I got him to tell that story, and the level of people that came out of the woodwork. And I'm not talking about just listeners. I'm talking about mayors and Congress people calling up and saying, we love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for your service. And he didn't kill himself. I feel like every person has value,
yes,
whether they know it or not. And my goal was to show him the value that he had. And we managed to do that.
Well, and that's why I've always been a big fan of yours, because that's what I got out of you. And I think you even said it in a article I read that covered you when you were coming up here, that you when you first got into radio, it was all about you, which we're all like that. The whole reason you get into it is kind of an ego thing. But when you get into talk radio, you start to learn it's not all about you. It's actually helping people. It's the audience. Mm-hmm. And that's what really turned me on about you. In fact, when you were going to come up here to Nashville, you were about to start, and you were at a welcome center, the welcome center down, by the state line.
Right.
And my wife and I were listening in the car. And we about just wanted to drive down there and welcome you to the state. Because I dug you from the minute I heard you on the radio. I became a fan.
Well, thank you. And I dug you. I dig both of you guys. I mean, I think it's awesome. I mean, no, the realization was, because it was, I mean, and I still have an ego. I mean, we all have.
Well, you have to.
I mean, we all have a certain level of ego if you're involved in this business, in any level of broadcasting. And I still have that. But I realized that it became so much more fun. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I recognized that if I made it about the people that were calling in, if you make it about the issues and the people, then the people are drawn to you more. But then slowly but surely I realized that I was having so much more fun. It became so much more important to me when it wasn't so much about me.
Right.
And it was about the people that gravitated to us for whatever reason, for entertainment purposes or for very important reasons, or for the news that they get from talk radio, or the camaraderie or the fellowship. And I think a lot of people gravitate to what we do, or at least they used to, because they sincerely want to be around people that they feel like understand them and get them. And you truly become family to a lot of these folks.
Well, that's what I love about I think WTN's audience is very unique, and I think that's why when you would, I think it was the first time you were on WTN, and not that my opinion mattered to anybody, but I remember texting Dan Mandis, and I said, "Man, this is your guy," and I think he already knew that anyway, but.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think the jury might still be out a little bit on all that, but I will say this, and not to get terribly maudlin on the subject, but there were very, very few. I didn't know Jay at the time. We met a little bit afterwards, but I felt like that I had the goods to be successful in Nashville. But there were very few people in that building that I wanted to impress, and you were one of them. I mean, there's no question about it. I wanted Johnny B's approval. Still do, as a matter of fact. But no, I mean, because I have such respect for the people that did it in the way that we have done it. And that's not to say that there weren't other people in the building that have done that. I mean, I love Dan Mandis to death.
Oh,
I mean, I love all those guys. I'm not knocking any of them, but I knew your backstory enough to know that you came through in the way that you did. And I had such respect for your relationship with Phil and for what you and Phil built over the years in Nashville. And I'm like, well, if I can't get this guy on board, then I'm probably screwed. All right. So,
well, I think it was pretty obvious that you had made it, because we were having a bad snow day. Mm-hmm. And Matt and I were sitting, we were against a wall there just talking. And the operations manager.
He's never going to forget this story.
The operations manager comes up to Matt and goes, "Hey man, we got you all set up across the street. Just drop my name. Everything will be taken care of." And I'm waiting on him to say the same to me. All he does is come to me and go, "Hey John."
Good luck getting home.
My version of that story. When I tell that story, Jay.
Yeah, he's told me that a number of times.
Charlie comes around the corner, And he goes, Matt, and it's like, it's a 5-minute diatribe. Matt, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for sticking in there with us. We know we've got you always saying, blah, blah, blah. And we got you set up the best Western. And you just say, man, if there's anything you need, just give me a call. And we appreciate you so much. And just God bless you and everything you're doing. And we appreciate you. And do you need a couple of dollars? And then there's a pause and he looks, he goes, oh, hey, Johnny.
Do you think he did that on purpose, though? That sounds like,
yes,
yeah.
I think he did.
Well, can you tell the story about how you came up to Nashville, how you got to talk to Dan? Because I love that story.
So, I mean, it's obviously it starts off in a very sad way because, and it's sad the way that some people, you go back to talking about egos.
Yeah.
It's sad the way that some people do their business in this business. And what I mean by that is that Dan told me later, Dan Mandis, who is our morning guy on Super Talk 99.7.
Great talent.
Yeah.
And
Good.
he's a great guy,
and a better
Marconi
guy.
Award winner.
That's
right,
right.
man.
And I told him that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah, there's no question about it. And Dan was just named by the way, let me give it a little shout out.
Oh, I love this.
Side story. Do you know this?
I saw that this
So
morning.
the Nashville scene is a liberal rag in Nashville, and they do these annual best ofs, and they have the best conservative category.
Which Phil used to win
Regularly,
habitually.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
number one all
right.
the time.
So this year, the winner of the best conservative of Nashville, according to Nashville Scene, was none. and in second place, Dan Mandis.
Dan Mandis.
So Dan said this morning,
Oh, it's great.
I'm second to none. I was like, well, I guess you are. And I told him, I said, I called him, I said, I've got that beat. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, last year, the Tennessean does these best of
Yes.
Nashville things, best
Yes.
of Music City things. And they had a best radio personality category. And I have no idea how it happened, but I won the best radio personality category for last year. This year, they don't have the category anymore. They retired the category.
Fancy
Good Lord, if Bobby Bones can't win every year, then we're getting it out of here. So I, obviously we were all praying for Phil and hoping that Phil got better. And when Phil sadly passed away, this was going into the 6th year of doing morning radio in Birmingham and being the program director of Talk 99.5. And I felt like we had conquered the mountain. We had beaten the Heritage Talk station, the quote unquote rush station in the market. And I kind of had felt like I had done everything that I could do. And I never wanted to be a program director. And 5 years of managing people when you don't really want to manage people is exhausting. And I got a great deal of satisfaction out of it, and I got a great deal back, but I was ready to move on. So I knew that. And I was watching what was happening in Nashville, and I knew how similar, or at least I felt that I knew how similar the markets were.
Yeah.
And so I wrote, after Phil passed, I wrote Dan a message, and I said, I know you're getting inundated with people right now, but let me know if I can help you out in any way. And, the next day he wrote back and said, thanks, appreciate it. And so about 2 days later, 3 days later, I wrote him a note and I said, by the way, I'm looking to move on. I work for Cumulus. I would love the opportunity to sit down and talk with you about possibly, being the guy to replace Phil, and or at least being considered for the radio station. And he didn't write me back. And so I followed up like 2 days later by saying, oh, by the way, I'm going to be in Nashville this weekend. I'm visiting some friends in Nashville this weekend. So I'm there anyway. If you want to sit down and talk, let me know. And this was like on a Tuesday or something. And I didn't hear back Wednesday. I didn't hear back Thursday. Now knowing Dan, I know exactly why I didn't hear back. But then I'm thinking, well, he's just sloughing me off.
Yeah.
But Dan just was being buried. There was so much going on at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, like on Thursday afternoon, he wrote me back and he said, hey, did you say you were going to be in Nashville this weekend? Because if you are, we maybe can get together. And I was like, absolutely. I'll be there visiting friends. If you want to get together, we can. And he said, sure, Saturday morning. And he told me where to meet him at a Starbucks in Hermitage. And I got off the phone and I told my wife, Erica, I said, I got to book a hotel in Nashville. And she said, why? I said, because this guy bit. I mean, yeah.
Because now I really got to go to Nashville for the weekend.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
So
And we're going to get some friends.
it just so happened that I booked a hotel right across the street. It was unbeknownst to me. It was right across the street from the radio station. It was the Best Western, thank goodness.
Oh,
not,
yeah.
not the Comfort Inn with the marble rye guy. That was,
Yeah. Boy, that was an experience.
so I went and I met with Dan, and Dan was 30 minutes late, which was great for me because he was but it was a great, we spent like 2 hours together, and then he asked me if I would do some fill-in work in the middays, and I did, and they offered me the job. And like 3 months later, Dan and I are sitting talking to somebody, I forget who, and he said, I want to tell you something, Matt. I knew that day that we met for coffee. He said, I made you do the fill-in stuff. And he said, but I knew that day you were my guy. And I was like, really? That means a lot to me, Dan. I appreciate that. And I was like, I've got something to tell you. And he said, what? I said, I don't have any friends in Nashville. and he thought for a minute. He goes, I knew it. I knew you were lying to me. And I was like, but the point is, and this is the message, right? To figure it out. There are plenty of ways to crack a nut. And I knew if I asked him if he would meet with me, and I told him I was driving to specifically do that, he would say no.
Exactly.
I knew that he would say no. But I felt like if I told him I was already there, that it would get me in the door. And I truly felt like if we sat down and we met, that I could get the gig. And it worked out.
And you did.
It worked out.
And I'm so glad it did. Because, I'm glad, I loved, of course, I loved Phil Valentine. I loved working with him. And I love Brian Wilson. But you being in that afternoon slot that's just perfect.
Well, I mean this sincerely. I mean, I hate saying that because, why would I say it if I didn't mean it sincerely? But the biggest compliment, I know that Phil and I do not do the same type of show.
No.
But the biggest compliments I get is when people tell me that I remind them of Phil. And what that means to me, because I know that Phil and I don't do the same type of show. So I know I can't possibly sound like Phil, right? But I hope that I'm giving them the same feelings. And I think that's what they mean.
Well, that's
right?
what I get out of it.
Right, because people don't, and this is another lesson that it took me a long time to learn, that because believe it or not, for anybody that's listened to my show, I used to be a lot more bombastic and forceful and I would say negative than I am now. And I realized at some point that people don't walk away from your radio show remembering what you say. They walk away from your radio show remembering how you made them feel.
Exactly.
And you can either make them feel good and hopeful, or you can make them feel bad and down. You can make them feel anxious. I mean, so I hope that I can come anywhere in the same orbit to the impact emotionally from a feeling standpoint that the way that Phil Valentine was able to do it.
Well, I think you do, because anytime I've listened to you, I always feel up. And that's why I was telling you one time whenever we were talking on the phone about Phil on the air. Phil was an upper. I mean, every time that dude walked in a room, he lifted it up. You do the same thing. I used to just treasure when I would be working, after the morning show, and I would pray that you would come to work, because every time you did, it was like it lifted the place up, man. And I loved one day when I had Trace Adkins on the phone.
Oh man!
And I noticed
Trace Adkins.
And I noticed Matt was he wouldn't move. He was sitting behind me the whole time.
That's Trace Adkins. No, I'm a kid, man. When it comes to that kind of stuff, I'm a kid
too.
But we talk about a lot of hard edge stuff on the show, and I get very passionate, and I get very frustrated, and I get very angry at some of the things that are going on. And so we have those times of anger, but generally in life, I remind myself every day, I get up every morning and I get to do this every day.
Yes.
I mean, I get to do something that I've always loved doing anyway. And And, y'all been around plenty of radio stations. There's a bunch of hens, man. They get around and those hen circles start going and everybody hates this guy and everybody hates that guy and everybody hates management. And, but if we just step back for a moment and recognize what a blessing it is that we get to do this on a daily basis, I try to come at it with that attitude.
Well, Phil used to use a great analogy to me. When things would be kind of going haywire with management, it was kind of on the negative side. He'd go, Johnny, put on the blinders. Mm-hmm. Let's just have fun. And we would.
Right.
And that's what you got to do. And that's what you're doing every afternoon.
Yeah, Matt, being in talk radio, especially moving over from music radio and getting into talk radio and having political talk for the most part, the conversations that you have, you mentioned instill feelings in people and that's what they remember. You're going to have your detractors. Mm-hmm. And how have you, you always have to have somewhat of a thick skin to some degree to do what you do. And do you let the detractors, do they get to you at times? Or how have you learned to just let that roll off your back, or does it?
No, I mean, haters are motivators, right? I mean, if you believe in what you're doing, and if you have the courage of your convictions, there have been, I will say this, there have been times, and I if I sat here long enough, I could probably think of an instance or two, but there have been times when I took a position on an issue and maybe I hadn't fully thought it out. And some people came at me earnestly and maybe even passionately and said, I think you're wrong. And so you reevaluate. I mean, you think about the presentation, you think about the positions that you're taking, you think about, is this best for the people, best for the country, best for the whatever. But, as far as the haters go, I mean, they're just that. They're folks that, I'm all about starting a conversation. So, I have a long-standing policy that anybody that is of interest to the listening audience that wants to come on my radio show is allowed to come on the radio show. And I don't care what your politics are, and I don't care how much we disagree. I feel like I have the courage of conviction, and, I have, my foundation grounded enough that I can present my argument, you can present your argument, and, the audience can decide who they agree with or who they don't. But, as far as the detractors go, I mean, it's just a lot of the same old stuff. It's, it's hate radio, and none of that. I mean, and it's just not true.
No,
it's also just not true. I mean, are we passionate? Sure, we're passionate. Do we believe that? Somebody called me up one time and said, "You know what your problem is, Murphy?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "You always think you're right." And I was like, Well, yeah. I mean, who
does it?
Why wouldn't
exactly.
Why wouldn't I always think I'm right?
That's why we're on here,
right? Do you want me to say things that I think are wrong?
Maybe you should have a segment called "I Could Be Wrong," but
Charles Barkley had a great good friend. Charles Barkley had a great book called "I Might Be Wrong, But I Doubt It." So as far as that goes, I mean, for me, it's very rarely reached a level where I thought, I mean, they get personal, of course they get personal, right. They'll, your detractors try to take you off your game by, doing that kind of thing. But it has rarely gotten to the point that I was worried about it. There's a couple of times in Birmingham. I haven't had anything in Nashville. There were a couple of times in Birmingham. I had my window busted out at the radio station once during a pretty heated issue with the city council. We're pretty sure we knew who did that, but we didn't have any security cameras. And then there was one time where I had a guy who, I made the point that none of our utilities were in my name, just as kind of a way to protect, it was all in Erica's name. And
your wife,
my wife, and her maiden name too at the time. And someone, I got a letter that wasn't mailed, that was just put in my mailbox to Matt Murphy. And it was a letter detailing what they had seen me doing over the last 48 hours. And so these people had followed me around for 48 hours. And it was like, I saw you go into the grocery store and blah, blah, blah. And that was that was a moment that it was like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? And, you have to protect yourself as best as you possibly can.
Right. I mean, in light of the Charlie Kirk situation, I know that we at Cumulus, we received an email after that incident saying, we're beefing up security and for our conservative, for everybody at the station, but especially the conservative talk show hosts. I mean, have you felt since the Charlie Kirk assassination, have you felt any more threatened, quote unquote? And how does your wife react to all of this stuff? Is she concerned?
Yeah, when the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I was on the air. And that was tough because we have Chris Hand on the radio station who worked with Charlie and Turning Point USA. And Chris had actually just months before dissolved his formal relationship, and he still had an informal relationship with him. But part of what Chris did was coordinate those events. He would help set up the logistics of those events, like flights and security apparatus and communication. So he was intimately in touch with the security team. He knew the security team had all their, cell phones and whatnot. And so Chris had, he had a line of communication in with those folks, I think, unlike really anybody else in the country at the time. And so he told me, I went on air at 3:00. We knew that Charlie had been shot. We knew it was serious. And Chris told me just after I got on air that Charlie didn't make it. He texted me, he said, but please don't say anything about it yet, because I want to make sure that, that's okay. And about, 15 minutes later, he texted me and said, you can say that Charlie's no longer with us. And so I had to go on the air and say that Charlie was no longer with us. And that was just a very tough day, obviously, because you knew it was one of those moments where that, everything is going to change now. Right. I mean, permanently in terms of how we do our business, in terms of interactions. But I never thought about myself. I never, I was never concerned about my own security until I got home that night in Mount Juliet, and I get my bag out of the truck and I walk in and I walk through the door, and Erica's in the kitchen and she's washing dishes, and she says, "Hey, honey." And I said, "Hey, honey." And she looked at me and burst into tears.
Wow.
And I'm like, "It's going to be okay." And I go over and I hug on her, and she was like, "I'm just worried that, they'll if they kill Charlie, what about you, blah, blah, blah." And my line to Erica, and it's true. I was like, "Baby, yes, it's true that we live in a dangerous world. Yes, it's true that there are crazy people out there. And yes, it's true that they killed Charlie Kirk. And you're right that I swim in that pond. That's the pond that I swim in." I said, "But you have to understand, Charlie Kirk was a whale in that pond, and I'm an itty bitty guppy. If they get to the guppies, baby," I was like, if they get from the whales all the way through the fish down to this little bitty guppy, we're in a hell of a lot of trouble in this country. I said, they're not going to get to this guppy for a long, long time. But the thing that I say all the time is that, when people talk about security or whatever, I appreciate the security apparatus that they're putting in place, but I've also never in my life, I hear talk about these signs that say you can't take guns into places. Mm-hmm. I've never seen one. Never seen one in my life. I see those signs about how you can't arm yourself to ultimately protect yourself. And there's certain people tell me all the time, there's these businesses that don't want you. I've never seen one of those signs.
Really?
Not in my life. I've never seen one, John. I haven't.
Never seen one.
I've never seen one. Can't say I'm looking, but I've never seen one.
All it is a bullseye. I hate to tell those folks.
Well, not on this one. It's obviously, it's a concern, but there have always been mentally insane people, and sadly, not to get terribly deep into it, but I would say this, that one of the things that Donald Trump has managed to do, he's managed to have such success against a group of people that are not accustomed to others fighting back and winning,
right?
That they have lost their minds. They have absolutely lost their minds. And all they know to do, and they've been doing it for years, is to elevate, and push. And now we're seeing the chickens come home to roost based on the language that they've been using. So if I'm an unhinged person and I hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Chuck Schumer or Kamala Harris telling me that Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler, well, who wouldn't want to kill Adolf Hitler?
Exactly.
Right? So these things matter. And I think we've reached that inflection point in American society where we got to tone all of that down. And frankly, one side seems to be willing to tone it down and the other side doesn't seem to care.
Well, but the whole thing is, I'm tired of the comparisons to Adolf Hitler because I heard it with Obama too.
Yes.
And neither Barack Obama or Donald Trump are anywhere near being like Adolf Hitler.
No.
I mean, you can't compare the two.
Well, I mean, it's the lack of a better argument. I mean, there's a phrase for it that if you reach the point that someone's calling you Hitler, that you've won the argument because they have nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, they have, excuse the expression, they have no more ammunition.
Well, that's right.
So that's it.
That's 100% correct. But yeah, I mean, it's a different time. But I don't think we're changing, what we're doing one bit. I mean, I don't pretend to have all of the answers, but I absolutely love what I do. I love it. One of the things, we talked about, my changing attitude about it's not being about me, it's being about the audience. One thing too is you would listen to other people, and I think Phil had this approach before I knew him and before I listened to him. But I would listen to the knock on Rush Limbaugh, and the knock on Rush Limbaugh is that he was a hater and he was all blah, 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 and he was always yelling and screaming and all this. And I would listen to Rush Limbaugh, and I'm like, this is the most optimistic guy I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
That no matter what is in front of us, I believe in America. No matter what we are facing, no matter what trials or tribulation, I believe in the concepts of the United States of America, and I believe in the American people. He always believed that the American people would be better than any issue that was in front of them. And I remind myself of that, is don't get too down, because my natural tendency is to be pessimistic. My natural tendency is to be like, we're hosed, man. We're circling the drain. Yes, we are. But I try to remind myself that the people are better than the government that represents them. And frankly, they're a heck of a lot better than some of the media outlets that want to proclaim our doom.
The 24-hour. I'm so sick of the 24-hour news
cycle.
Oh, I am.
Well, Matt, you said when you were a young man, you were Joe Liberal.
I was.
What changed you?
Neil Bortz. To put it really, really succinctly, I was living in Carrollton, Georgia. I had started doing this talk show when the station flipped, and I knew that I was not doing it very well. And so I was trying to absorb people who were successful, and I started listening to WSB in Atlanta. And Neil Bortz had just left WGST, had to sit out a 6-month non-compete and move over to WSB. And I listened to this guy. Neil Bortz informed me that I was a libertarian by listening to him on the radio. I just thought that I was liberal. And listening to him, he just made a tremendous amount of sense. And so I started doing what he told me to do, which is go do my reading and go do my homework and reading up on, the differences between libertarianism and conservatism or whatever. And it kind of informed me that I'm a liberty first guy. And I'm naturally a contrarian. So, I like to say that I Groucho Marx used to say this, and I say it about myself, that I wouldn't belong to any club that would have me as a member. and so that includes, Club Republican. So I don't really belong to that club because I feel like my viewpoints deviate, quite a bit from Republican or conservative values. So, that's why I started calling myself a libertarian with a small L, because frankly, the Libertarian Party is a little wacky too.
Yes.
But I believe in the basic concept of, government serves best when it serves least, and the people themselves are responsible for their own futures and their own fates. And with liberty comes that level of responsibility.
Well, I just wish we'd get to that too. I wish politicians would learn that they work for us. It's not the other way around.
Well, there's no money in, I was saying this yesterday that, because we had this race that, the special election race that concluded. And I'm like, I don't want a politician to tell me if you're a conservative or a libertarian, why in the world would you want a politician to tell you what they're going to Washington, D.C. to do?
Exactly.
I want them to tell me what they are going to D.C. to undo.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Right. We have far too much government in our lives as it is.
Yes.
But you don't win re-elections telling people what you didn't do. And that's part of the problem is that they get up there and they get Washingtonized and they become convinced because of all of these consultants, oh, you've got to bring something home, whether that's a project or money or whatever it is, and it feeds the problem.
It's called Potomac fever.
100%.
Exactly what it is.
100%.
I also want to share something that's a little more lighthearted. But when Matt started at this station, my wife and I really became big admirers of his show and loved him as a person and his wife, Erica. So Erica and Glenna, my wife, started this horrible habit of making food, and it grew.
It did.
It went out of control. It got to the point where I was walking in. I mean, I'd have to go out to my car several times to walk in with. So once again, Matt, we've started it again. My wife has made you and Erica some goodies of some kind.
I love it. Should I open this now?
Whatever you want to do.
I'll open it. I'll give it. Oh yeah, toss it over here.
But it got out of control. It got to the point to where I talked to both women.
Thank you, Jim.
In fact, I talked to Matt one day. I said, we've got to put an end to this.
Well, I know because we're both getting fat.
And we were getting fat, and then we were having to carry all of this stuff in.
So, Glenna, I'll tell the quick story that Glenna, do you like pickles?
Oh yeah, well we've already received
I've got
the
it. Yeah,
Glenna special in pickles, and they're fabulous.
I am a huge pickle fan. I'm a pickle aficionado. I would say I subscribe to Pickle Aficionado magazine, and these are the best pickles that I've ever had.
Yeah, they're
the
darn
best
good.
pickles that I've ever had. And I accused Glenna of putting crack or something in them at one point because they're so good. Well, so Glenna, recognizing how much I loved them, she gave us like several jars, and one was this huge jar of pickles that we lost. So Erica put that up somewhere that we don't normally keep food because that's the only place that huge jar of pickles would fit. Yeah. And we found it like 2 months ago, and so I immediately ate them all. And we cleaned the jar and we set it aside to get back to you and Glenna when we saw you next. And so Erica's out of town. And I'm talking to her this morning, and I say, "Where's the jar? I'm going to see Johnny B and Jay today. We're doing a podcast." And she got so angry at me. She's like, "What? Why didn't you tell me you guys were? What did?" I'm like, "Why are you so angry?" I would have made something to send to give to Johnny B and Glenna.
Continue the tradition.
Now it continues on. So
All right.
So this is
You're welcome to drop anything off with me. if you need to.
Oh my gosh,
I will
even-
get it to Johnny.
Let's not get crazy.
Oh, looky there. She even put a
Oh!
whoa.
There you
More
go.
pickles.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, you got
more pickles.
get to reload.
Glenna, thank you. God bless you. You're an angel from heaven, and not just because you have to put up with Johnny B.
Boy, that's the truth.
That's awesome. Thank you.
If it weren't for her, I wouldn't be here. Trust me. Well, buddy, you can listen to Matt Murphy every afternoon from 3 till 7 on the big Super Talker, 99.7.
99.7.
3 to 7 Central Time.
That's
and
right.
of course, tell them all the ways it can listen. You don't have to be in radio
Right.
range.
So, I mean, that's right. I mean, 99.7 FM, anywhere from Alabama to Kentucky and all points in between. You can also get us on anywhere that you download music or information on the internet, you can get us, right? So that's podcast, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeart. We have our own app, and then
Super Talk TV.
Super Talk TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Rumble.
Yes.
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Rumble. I encourage you to go over to YouTube because those people on the YouTube chat are insane.
They are insane.
They can say anything. Have you been over there? It's crazy.
It is great. Well, and you when you meet them out in public, they're a pretty wild bunch. They really are.
And I try to do this as best I can. I try to remember to remind people, if you go over to the YouTube page and you engage in the YouTube chat, that is not a monitored chat. We don't know what those people are going to say.
No.
We don't vouch for them.
No.
We have nothing to do with what some of the language that's being used over there, some of the concepts. So, but it's a pretty rowdy bunch. I absolutely love the audience. I love Middle Tennessee. I have fallen in love with it. I fell in love with this state as soon as I got here.
Well, I think the feeling's mutual.
Yeah,
and really,
I mean, and Johnny can vouch for this. I mean, I'm a member of the Matt Murphy fan club, and when I first started at the station, Johnny and I didn't really know each other that well at that point. And I told Johnny, I said, that Matt Murphy guy, that dude he's a major talent.
Well,
and,
we both
talked about that.
We both have said that if there's anybody that could be syndicated. On that radio station, right here.
Are you guys still charging the same fees for this that y'all have always charged?
Well, yeah, we really are.
No, but seriously, Matt. I mean, you're a major talent.
Yes, you are.
Just have a good time.
I remember there was one particular episode where you started speaking about a veteran or something along those lines that had passed away or something, and you were talking about a funeral or what have you. And I remember after that particular episode, I went to you and told you, I said, that was the most compelling hour of radio that I had heard in years. Yeah. I mean, and what really fascinates me, I mean, I know you do some show prep, but you don't script anything.
No.
And your ability to just speak from the heart and speak extemporaneously, it makes you so great at what you do.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that great part, but I will say this, that I like doing a show that is more free-flowing. And I still really, really love caller interaction. I love engaging the callers and getting them involved in the show. I've always felt like, my producers say, well, do you want me to screen this person or that person? I was like, I don't want you to screen anybody out. I mean, there are obviously exceptions. There are certain people that don't know how to act or people that call chronically, right?
Right.
But other than that, I was like, it is my job to make it interesting, right? And if I get a caller that is not so interesting, I either need to make them interesting or go on to another caller. At the same time, it's really about the voice of the people, and I love the flow of a show where you end up in a place and you look back and you're like, how in the heck did we get here?
Yeah.
How in the world did we go from there to here? But as I get older, I remember the show you're talking about, and I think it was me relating the story of I happened upon, it might be a different one, but I happened upon a funeral at Arlington National Cemetery and watching a veteran be buried at Arlington National Cemetery, and I tell that story quite a bit, and because it moves me so much.
Yeah, it moved me.
But man, oh man, as I get older, I get so sentimental and so soppy, and I can't tell those stories so much anymore because I start crying.
Oh yeah, you turn into Dan Mandis.
And nobody wants that, Johnny. Nobody. There's only one Dan Mandis.
Well, and that's one. That was the heartbreaking thing about me having to leave the station, was that I loved everybody there.
Yeah.
You talk about a great group of people and a great audience. I would urge anybody to listen to WTN because it's a very interesting station. They've got a very interesting take. Everybody's different. Every talk show host is different. But I love listening to you. Plus, you have Ken Weaver.
Oh man, Ken Weaver is an absolute gem.
I wish we could get him on here, but he's always busy.
Well, he's got a lot of things going on.
Yeah,
he lives
does.
down there in Murfreesboro, and he hates driving on I-24 so much that he probably won't come see you. I will say that in this business, you learn on the inside of the business, the part that a lot of listeners don't see. You try to learn to have thick skin and not allow these things to personally affect you. The way that you handled what happened between you and Cumulus was the most gracious, professional manner that I can possibly imagine. I will say this, on or off the air, I've never heard Johnny B say a bad thing about what happened to him. And Johnny B, there are plenty of...
Well, those episodes are yet to come.
Yeah, those episodes
Spoke a little too soon there, man.
Well, I mean, and there are plenty of reasons why you could. Is the point, because there's an unfortunate side to this business where there are oftentimes, and I won't speak about my own employer, but I'll just say generally speaking, there's a complete disconnect between what they do crunching numbers somewhere far, far away and how it impacts real people. And I'm not just talking about you or me. I'm talking about the listening audience.
Oh, yeah.
And it was incredibly impactful when you, quote unquote, left the radio station. And it was bothersome and just personally bothersome because I felt like you meant so much to the radio station. And, you know, you just have to kind of suck it up and
yeah, you do.
And keep going on.
Well, and plus, yeah, I would say that the program director, I was treated with respect and kindness, and I appreciated that. And they were nice enough to say, you can say goodbye tomorrow. And because most places would just say, hey, you're not
bring your
coming
headphones.
Back. Yeah, bring your headphones.
Can I tell you my best firing story though?
Sure.
So I was in Birmingham. I was working for Crawford Broadcasting. And that's another one that if you only have 9 months to live, go to work for Crawford Broadcasting. Well, they were a religious-based radio station. They created a secular news talk station that, worked for a while for them, but they started kind of encroaching on what we were doing from a content perspective that made all of us very uncomfortable. And eventually it just wasn't going to work out. So I was kind of the last man standing. I was doing my afternoon show. They had let their program director go. We had an interim program director that had never done it before. And Mark, a very nice guy, he was in sales and he'd been elevated to PD for some reason. And so my show started at 3. I was on from 3 to 7. And I would get in about 2. And there was nobody before me, so I would just go into the studio and set up and everything. And Mark, you could see people coming in through the lobby. You can see the receptionist through a window, just to paint the picture here. And then you go around and you go into the studio. And so every day I would see Mark come in. He would come in. He would sit down with me. We would talk for 5 or so minutes. All is well. And then he would go back to his office and I would continue prepping for the show. Well, I found out later that the senior vice president of the company had flown into Birmingham, Alabama from Bluebell, Pennsylvania to fire me on a Friday.
Wow.
But no one bothered to check whether I was going to be there, and I had scheduled a vacation day that day. So
that's great.
So I was out of town.
Perfect.
So she comes in to fire me. The guy she was firing isn't there. I don't know why they didn't just pick up the phone and do it that way, but whatever. So that Monday, there I am bebopping into the radio station, and I sit down. And I knew the writing was on the wall for me. I mean, I knew that, it was just a matter of time, but I was not going to quit.
Right.
I was going to be let go. And so Mark, this humble fella that had never done this before, he walks in like I see him walk in every day, and he cuts me a look and then looks away. And then he goes and I see him talking to the receptionist. And he's like saying something to the receptionist, and I see her look up at me with these wide eyes. And so Mark leaves and doesn't come in like he does every day. And I hit the talk back button, and my producer was setting some things up, and I hit the talk back button and I said, "Hey, I'm getting fired today." And he said, "What?" And I said, "I'm getting fired today." "No, shut up." And I was like, "Watch." Like 5 minutes after Mark comes in, the receptionist gets up and walks into the room and says, "Mark needs to see you in his office." And I was like, "All right, here we go. Here we go. This is not my first. This is not my first. I swear what I'm about to tell you is true. It sounds like it's not. I swear this is true." So I walk in, and the business manager's sitting in the room, and I was like, "Oh, all right. We got a witness. We got the guy that's doing it.
Stack of paperwork. I got to sign. A little paycheck and an envelope.
We got it going. Let's go." And Mark has just this look of death on his face. And he's just staring at me. And I sit down, and he starts, "Matt, well, you weren't here on Friday." And so, Laura was in, and he starts mumbling and fumbling.
Yeah.
And he starts crying.
Usually it's the other way around.
Right.
And I like I say, I swear this is true. I reached across the table and patted his hand, and I said, "Mark, it's going to be okay."
I wish you well in your future endeavors, Mark.
And so if you've ever been in management, the first thing that they tell you about this part of the job is do not apologize. Mm-hmm. The first words out of his mouth after I said it's going to be okay is, "I'm sorry."
You're admitting wrong.
And if it's radio, he probably got let go shortly after that. That's usually the way it goes.
No question.
Was it being like fired by Michael Scott or something?
It was the best firing ever. I mean, it was so nice. I got my paperwork. I signed my paperwork.
It's happened to you a couple of times. I mean, you ever think about just messing with them? You know, and be like,
I mean,
no, I'm not. Come on.
oh, whatever. I'm going to go do my job.
Right.
What are you guys talking about? You know, but at the same time, you're like, my concern is let's make sure we're not burning the bridges that we might need to cross back over at some point. So, luckily, none of those bridges matter at Carver Broadcasting anymore, so I can tell any story I want. So, but they did. But to your point, I'm like, are you going to let me do this? Is like 2:30. My show's at 3. It's like, are you going to let me do my show? And he said, yes, but you can't say anything about you leaving until the last 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, that's fine. And so what they did, it wasn't Mark, it was another producer that they brought in to sit in the room with me, in the studio, not in the control room, but in the studio with me. And he said, I'm here to make sure you don't say anything you're not supposed to say. And I was like, what are you going to do? That's what I said. I was like,
he pats the gun on his
and
neck.
I was like, what are you going to do if I start saying something?
Tackle you?
And he says, I think I'm supposed to pull the plug to the microphone. And I'm like, look, there's a guy in the control room.
I love radio.
Well, and then they also, it was confusing as hell to the audience because they put the delay on a 40-second delay.
Oh, my God.
And they said they did that just in case Matt says something insane. 40-second delay. So,
I'd be burning that bridge all day long.
you get people, it's a caller-driven show. So I got callers, and they're listening on the line. They have no idea what's going on. They're 40 seconds behind. And so I go to them, hey, Jay, you're on the phone. And there's,
what are we talking about?
Jay, you're on. Listen on the... What?
It's got to give the producer a lot of comfort, though.
Oh,
if anybody cusses, he has plenty of time.
Yeah. I can go on a 40-second George Carlin-esque rant. And they're like, I still got 30 seconds.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Well, dude, this has been so much fun, and I'm so glad you came and hung out with us.
I love you
today.
guys. I love you guys. I love what you're doing on the podcast. I watch the podcast. I enjoy the podcast. I encourage everybody to like and subscribe to the podcast.
Well, there you go. And Jay has all the info.
Yeah, we are getting there in terms of being on more platforms. Of course, any audio platform that you can think of for podcasts, we're on it thanks to Jim McCarthy.
Or Chris.
Yes. But yeah, Facebook, YouTube, we're getting on Twitch, and we've got a website that's about to be debuted, and merchandise is coming soon.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
I'm buying merch.
Are you buying merch?
Yeah, as soon as merch is ready, I'm buying merch.
Well, there we go.
The
Our
merch should be arriving in the next couple of weeks.
Well, we want you to come back to see the Triple J's again. We'll have more interesting people for you. Sometimes it's just us, and we're interesting enough, I think.
Yeah, of course.
It's Circling the Drain. Thanks for joining us.